This is a whole new concept and a great idea. Tell me a bit about yourselves and how you got here. Offer, maybe you can kick off.
Thank you. You know, as a clinical psychologist, I always gravitated towards models that really took reality seriously and not only the inner reality, the models that made room for real life goals. And so working with clients over the years, I found that so many of them are coming in and really ask for very concrete, palpable changes. They're coming with goals and honestly speaking, some of the models that I've been trained with, more dynamic and such, as much as they're great and they have a lot to offer, there's really something lacking, something missing. And so I found myself over the years sort of gravitating towards other models like CBT and others. And from that space, starting thinking more integratively, trying to put things together. That's how I found schema therapy and started applying the schema concepts into my work as a coach. So it was this kind of a journey for me.
And this is exactly the conversation that Offa and I had about a year ago, I think, when I absolutely adored, the idea that he started to paint. And I saw a coaching course for psychologists. And I was like, Offa, I would love to take this course because I really would like to learn, more. I want to be a coach, not just a counseling psychologist and a schema therapist. And maybe, that would help us a lot. Offa already has his coaching qualification. So I think that's how I got here actually. And ever since, at every meeting we have, I just feel more and more excitement. And, the more we build, the more we put into our company, our adventure is I don't know, just really keeps me excited and motivated.
That's a wonderful, wonderful place to be. Maybe you can just paint that picture a little bit of a client that changed your thinking around the combination of coaching and schema therapy. Was it someone who perhaps was looking for motivation or something that perhaps coaching offers that schema doesn't?
For me, it was actually something very similar that you just described. I was working with a client for over a year. We got to the place where they were a lot more, stable. They were able to make decisions easier. They just had a more fulfilled life. But then a lot of our focus changed towards future. Like, what's now? I'm in a good place right now, but I have all these ideas and all these goals and all that. And that's when I was like, wow, I wish I could just, at this point, I could just turn my therapy session into a coaching session. There are, boundaries and discussions about it if you should do that or should not. It's still up in the air. I didn't at that point. I closed the therapy process, and then the person came back about 6 months later for coaching. So yeah, that was for me actually. Alpha.
Mm. Yeah. So yeah, and that's an exciting thing, right? When a client sort of gets to the point where the goals become from sort of change from I guess working on eliminating what we say like eliminating a diagnose like like treating depression or working on anxiety. But then when they start feeling better, other goals emerge. And these are tend to be, just as you say, they tend to be more future focused, very specific. And for me, it was the same process with somebody who started, with one set of goals that has more to do with their mental health. But after a while, sometime, like 2 years into the process, the goals started changing. and we had to sort of what we call recontract. Then, because at that point we started working on something else, which was really achieving a business or work-related goals. And the framework remained schema, the schema model, about which I hope we'll be able to talk some more. It was the schema model, but applied in a different way through the coaching lens.
That's really interesting, Offer. That kind of makes me think a little bit about how you take the best of schema and the best of coaching and combine it in your curriculum. Can you kind of talk a little bit to what aspects of coaching you bring in and what aspects of schema you bring in?
Yeah. So
Because it
thank you.
would be impossible to teach the whole curriculum for both those disciplines. It would be a huge undertaking.
Absolutely. And I think this is something we're both very proud of, this the schema coaching model, the specific one that we've created and we are applying in our teaching and our work is something we feel very proud about and very excited about because we see results and that's what people are coming in for. But I'm gonna get more specific than that. I think the beauty that emerges from integrating, from putting these two concepts or to these two models, theories together, is that you get the the precision and the high definition that you get from coaching with the depth of the work, with the depth that comes from the schema model. So on the one hand, we're very goal focused, we're very goal oriented, we're contracting with our clients to work towards very well-defined goals. And we have all bunch of tools that we're using in order to pinpoint the target and to map out the steps to get there. But we're also doing a very thorough schema assessment. It's a whole thing, really understanding not just generally how the person functions, but really we go deep. What are the underlying, I guess, life lessons, the stuff that really is the blueprint for our functioning. So we're doing a lot of assessment there, and that allows us to create a very, very personally tailored roadmap for the work that's really the coaching process. And so the toolboxes we use are essentially a combination of some more traditional coaching tools and frameworks integrated with the depth of the schema, the schema tools. Yeah.
Great, thank you for that. Now, I still struggle with a real life, practical, clinical example of a client. Can you maybe take me through? Perhaps I'm a clinical psychologist who has a long line of clients who have self-esteem issues, who, because of childhood trauma and abuse, are struggling. How is it specifically that you feel this would be of help to that clinician?
So, um, let me take that question if that's okay, because I think some of our students are coming in already with some with clinical background, with clinical training, and that's great. And for some, it really helps them sort of get a lot from learning the schema coaching model. But I have to say this is not a necessary thing because when we teach, we really give all the foundation, everything that one needs in order to become a really, really successful schema coach. Now, uh, another point here, which is to us is very important, sometimes people come in with and they have sort of clinical issues. And some coaches in some traditions say, oh, because I'm a coach, I can't work with you. And I think that that's really, really unfair. Almost, I would say almost like bordering with the unethical. And I'm using strong language here and very sort of, purposefully. And the reason is because I think that the fact that somebody is dealing with emotional pain should not make them ineligible to pursue important life goals. And so, even though they may want to pursue a more traditional clinical therapy for their emotional needs, they may very well get a lot and have their goals, get help in achieving their life goals through a schema coaching process. So as much as we have respect for the clinical work, and obviously we're both doing that, we also see a lot of benefit in helping and meaning in helping people achieve their life goals, whether they're suffering emotionally from other stuff or not.
Yeah, I just want to add to this, Sofa.
Please.
I do agree with everything you said. I think what I would add to this is that we would never encourage, actually, I think we would discourage our coaches to contract for eliminating a psychological diagnosis.
Yes,
So if
absolutely.
someone would come to us and wants to do schema coaching and say, I want to be less depressed or I want to be less anxious, we would never contract that. And contracting is actually what sets out the whole schema coaching process. So I think we spend not even one, probably a few sessions during our teaching, just to talk about contracting and what are the sorts of things that a schema coach would be safe to contract and would be completely out of their comfort zone, and then what is the referral process? So we don't just, leave them hanging, but we would also help them with that. Right, Alpha? I think so.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yes, that's very important. I wanted to ask about scope of practice because for me, it's an industry that does overpromise and underdeliver very often.
Yeah.
And I wonder, because it is so unregulated, if you worry, Offer, about the what you can deliver and what you do promise, and to what extent you refer when you don't, when it is outside your scope of practice. So for me, that's a great strength to be able to say, you know what, I can't advise you on diet because I'm not a dietitian. I can't advise you on neuroscience because that's not within my scope of practice. But I can refer you to some academic work, or I can refer you to a colleague in that sector. Is it something that you worry about, scope of practice?
Absolutely, and it's very important. I'm glad you're stressing this, this aspect of our work. And I wanna say it very clearly. Part of our curriculum, we're devoting a substantial chunk to the ethical elements or the ethical considerations of the practice of schema coaching, especially because the schema theory or the schema model started as a therapy. It can get a little tricky or confusing for some, right? So differentiating, is this an appropriate coaching case, or is this a case that we need to refer? So this is
Mm.
something that we really spend time on in order to help our coaches make the best and ethical decisions to support our clients.
So at the end of the course, which looks absolutely fascinating, what sort of certification can I expect?
Mhm. Okay, so we are issuing a schema coaching certificate. And we are also providing our students, or by then coaches, schema coaches, with a detailed description of our syllabus. That the description of our syllabus has to meet the ICF, which is the International Coaching Federation's best practices and requirements for applying for an ICF accredited coaching certification. So basically, we chose to take the portfolio pathway, which everyone will be able to look up on the ICF website, where the course itself is not ICF accredited,
I see. Thank
However,
you.
the syllabus is going to meet all their
Hmm.
requirements, so they can
Okay.
choose to
Thank
certify
you.
as an ICF coach.
Thank you. Appreciate that was a great answer. It's not an easy question to answer. Offer, I wondered, looking at the competition, it looks to me like a really crowded space just now. You know, if I open up my Gmail junk, I'm going to find at least 20 life coaches who are going to offer me, I'm just one click away from and $100 or $1,000 from becoming a millionaire. Can you tell me what tools are you going to teach me that I can't get from other courses?
Of course. So I think like I'm going to point out to three differentiators, okay, that I think are really at the heart and soul of the model. I think the first point would be the applicability. A schema coaching can be applied to a host of contexts. It can be applied to workplace, it can be applied for parenting issues, it can be applied to health related issues, it can be applied to personal, sort of life coaching kind of goals. So it has all these different applications that are very, very I guess they open. So when somebody is training with us, they're really opening up their world to be able to help different kinds of issues. And of course, each coach will later on get further, I guess, further more of an expertise in the field they're working at, that they're going to be choosing to work at. But we're definitely giving the toolkits, the skill sets that is needed for that. So that's one, I think that's one very important differentiator, because some other programs out there tend to focus on one of those fields, on one area. And I think that this is, even though it sounds like, it might be a lot, we're definitely, our model really is very suitable for that. So that's one thing. The second thing is the depth. And I want to clarify what I mean by that. So as many of the coaching models out there tend to be very, like they define the goals very well, and they do very thorough assessments. The thing is that when is that the tools that they're using are largely cognitive in their nature. They focus a lot on thinking processes, on faulty ideas, on faulty concepts, and they try to work a little bit like cognitive therapy that puts a lot of emphasis on changing the way people think in order to bring about different ways of being in the world, different ways of behaving. Our model, even though we do have the cognitive component, we also have a very, very strong experiential one. So as
Mm,
an important focus is helping clients go through not only cognitive change processes, but also emotional change processes that are very much experiential.
mm,
And that way, the change really sticks. So it's
mhm,
not going to be that short-lived, oh, right now I'm out of a session and I have a new idea of how to go about it, but then it fades. The kind of impact that we have is very deep and long-lasting because
mhm,
of the experiential engagement. Okay.
mhm.
And so sorry for being taking so long to answer. Okay, but you asked a very important question. I think the third element has to do with the fact that we limit our classes to no more than 20, 30 people, students in one cohort. We
Mhm,
are giving a lot of personal attention, and we care a lot about each and every student's path towards becoming a successful coach. And that's why in our course we're going to have regular check-ins with our students. We invite them to drop in when they have problems or issues or
Mm,
questions.
mm,
We give them, extra training, even opportunities, even when they graduate. And I think most importantly, and very in a very exciting way, we're working right now on creating some sort of an internship option that so that people when they finish, they actually have clients lined up for them, allowing them to start working and get supervision as they do
mm,
so.
mm. Yes, thank you. Gabriella, maybe you can talk a bit to that aftercare, which is very often lacking in the online course industry. I think this idea that you can fall back and come home, that you can rely on resources, that you always have a place to ask questions and feel included.
Mhm.
Are there, again, Offer touched on it, are there parts of that that you can elaborate on?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you pulled me in because I did have quite a lot of thoughts around this topic. I just want to take one step back through the course itself because what Ofa explained is actually being practiced during the course. So anything we teach then goes into practice. So almost half of the course is about, okay, we showed you all these tools. Now get into pairs or get into triads and into, the Zoom rooms, and let's do this. Let's feel this. How does it feel to ask these questions? How does it feel to receive these questions? And as Ofa said, we always have group processing as well. Like we really involve everybody. And therefore, they become an amazing group for themselves to work in and, to connect with others and for us to work with. Regarding your question about aftercare, the Learning Hub is being built at the moment, which is going to be a part of our website. The basics, like the basis of it, is already there, where these guys can all connect through, and then afterwards, we haven't discussed maybe every 2 weeks, once a month, we're going to have mentoring sessions for them, as a group. They can
Mhm.
just drop in, they can bring us their cases, anything that they want to ask or share. And I think that's an amazing way of not just keeping in touch, but keeping them on board, helping them to think over their cases together with us. And they
Mm,
are keep developing even after the
mm.
course.
So a sort of active alumni, in a sense, that will be engaged.
I think that's a good phrase. Yeah.
Offer it was very interesting to hear you talk about the added depth that the course offers. Can you maybe take me through one or two cases of where in the course you've found that emerging in the students?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I can maybe a way to exemplify this depth could be through a case, right? Through a client
Mhm,
that I've been working with, and actually, speaking about the course, like always when I teach and when Gabriella is teaching and we do this thing together, we're always bringing, of course, with our clients' permission and with changed names and details, keeping our clients' confidentiality, but we're always trying to make the more theoretical teaching very much alive. So we bring in cases. So in order to answer your question, I'm going to bring in a case, and that's a case of an executive who's been dealing with issues, well, some emotional outbursts at the work setting, and mostly with people who were higher up in the company hierarchy.
mhm,
And he's been sort of talked to about it. The HR person, a very kind person, brought up the issue, and he's been recommended some schema coaching. And so working with this guy, the work has been a lot around initially, trying to contract, what's the goal? Well, the goal was pretty straightforward, right? He wanted to be able to keep it together and not get triggered as much when he was interacting with his superiors at work, because he was really on the verge of being, put on a program and maybe even let go.
Mhm.
And so part of the work was contracting and doing like deep assessment, understanding what are the core schemas, the life lessons that he picked up as a kid and over his life, and more specifically the ones that get triggered in his interactions with authority. And so after doing a lot of mapping, what we did, we started going more deeply, more experientially into some very formative scenes of himself with authority figures in his past. And the situations we got to were some experiences in his high school, and at this point I won't get into details, but what we were able to do in those scenes is what we call imagery rescripting. We were able to activate some of these old memories and do some work in order to help him sort of gain more options, more sort of learn new ways or new options as how to assert himself and how to take care of his own needs in those situations. Going back to the current day situation, he found those experiences very valuable because it became some sort of a resource within him, enabling him to show up in a different way in the work setting. So and so that's an example of something that could have been approached on a very cognitive or only behavioral way if you take a more traditional coaching approach, whereas in our work we dove deep into the experiential, emotional, and that made a huge change for this guy.
Thank you. Is it possible that if you had approached it as a coach, a life coach, the answer would have been very misguided? It might have been, you need to change your job, you need to change your relationship, you need to move to another city.
Yeah.
How do you kind of keep that side of the that industry out of your teaching? It must be tempting to say, well, just kind of grow up and this is life, get on with it, change your job.
Yeah. So I think the way you portrayed it right now, really, this is like the thing, we feel so we cringe, right? Like Gabriella and me, when we hear sometimes we hear from people who've been trained in a different way, maybe less rigorous, maybe obviously with less depth involved, and we cringe, right? Because this is really not how people change. Very seldom people change because you tell them do this or do that. They do change when you engage them in a way that that involves their feelings, that involves their emotions. And I want to bring, maybe a quote you guys probably know by Maya Angelou, who said, people will forget everything you said and they'll forget everything you did, but they will remember how you made them feel. And I think that part of the depth in the schema work comes from the fact it's not that we don't engage thoughts and behaviors. We do, obviously, we're coaches, but we do it in a way that takes emotions into account. And when that part's added, you get really, that's where you get the gold. That's where you get the change.
Yes, thank you. Gabriella, you maybe offer talk there about a specific client. Do you have someone in mind who has benefited from the course?
From the course itself, you mean a trainee?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Yeah, of course. So what happens is that it's really interesting to see how when they give us feedback, while they are doing the course, they're like, wow, you can't really hide from this, right? You have to feel like I'm so sorry, but yes. So it will move you as a coachee. It will move you as a coach. We also teach and spend quite a lot of time on looking at that. What is it bringing up for you when you're sitting there as a coach in front of your coachee? How can you deal with that? So we want to make it as safe as possible for the coaches. The example that I want to give you is one of our trainees actually came and she said, I thought I can just do this, from a fair distance. You're gonna give me the tools and I'm gonna become a schema coach. And when the practices came, it really moved them. So she was very close just to say, okay, I don't think this course is for me. But then we had enough trust so that she could come to us and say all her worries, and we could talk about it. And she actually decided to stay. And we're so happy that that she's still with us. We are just going to finish the cohort that we are teaching right
Mm,
now.
mm,
And I think, I'm sure you agree, but that's such an amazing thing for
mm.
us.
So if you had to summarize for me, would it be challenging and rewarding? That perhaps the combination of those two, I'm going to struggle to get through it, but it's going to be hugely rewarding.
Offer?
I couldn't summarize it better. Absolutely. It's going to be challenging, yes, and I think in that sense, I want to say maybe it's a little self-defeating what I'm saying, but I think that, maybe schema coaching is not for everyone, but it's definitely for those who are brave enough to dive into not only their cognitive, parts of themselves and
Mm,
the behavioral parts of the human experience, but also that of the emotional one. And and I think that when you put all these together, the cognitive, the emotional, and the behavioral, that's when real change, that's when the magic happens, that's when
Mm,
change occurs, and that's
mhm,
very rewarding.
mhm. And what do you say, Offer, to somebody who thinks, well, I really don't want to go through that pain? It's just not, why would I do that?
I would tell them, I really, really understand, because when it hurts, it's really bad. At the same time, just as when you go to the dentist and you've got a cavity, you know, if you're not gonna take care of that cavity, it hurts now, it's gonna hurt even more later. And I
Yes.
think it's gonna be worthwhile, going in a safe, protected, like together into those more pained parts of ourselves in order to heal them. So it's either we deal with them now in safety, or they're gonna be there and it's gonna get worse. So I think it's really worthwhile to do that. At the same time, we really respect each and every one and their pace and their process. And we want to say, and maybe it's really not for everyone.
yeah.
Thank you, Offer. Thank you, Gabriella. It's been a real pleasure talking to you and being enlightened by what you're doing, and I wish you every success.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.